He flaunted his mistress at the hearing. I dropped my evidence. Silence filled the room. Nicole Harper sat quietly in the sleek, glass-walled conference room of Preston and Myers, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. She smoothed the crisp white blouse beneath her navy blazer, her fingers trembling slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of the moment. At 27, she was still the youngest associate in the firm, and today was unlike any other day. Today, she would step into the courtroom as lead counsel for the first time in a high-stakes fraud trial that could either launch her career or shatter the fragile respect she'd clawed for through years of underestimated effort. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood far from the polished downtown offices, Nicole was all too familiar with doubt cast her way. The sleek marble floors and tailored suits surrounding her always whispered a silent reminder. She didn't belong here. Her colleagues, born to privilege or well-connected families, didn't hide their skepticism. Nicole was the outsider, the girl they pitied or dismissed. Yet, beneath her modest demeanor was a fierce intelligence and relentless drive, a combination that had earned her this chance despite all the doubters. The case she was about to argue revolved around a woman named Annabella Moore, her client. Accused of embezzling millions from a charitable foundation, Annabella's sudden fall from grace had been scandalous. The media had feasted on the story, painting her as greedy and deceitful. Nicole believed otherwise, deeply convinced of her client's innocence. But convincing the court wouldn't be easy with the opposition led by Thomas Grant, a name that sent a chill down Nicole's spine. Thomas was a seasoned, ruthless litigator whose reputation for crushing adversaries was nearly legendary. He was also Annabella's ex-boyfriend, and that personal edge made him all the more dangerous. Nicole's thoughts snapped back as the courtroom door swung open and Thomas entered, dragging with him an atmosphere thick with arrogance. His tailored suit was impeccable, his confidence bordering on cocky. Behind him walked Juliet, his current mistress, flanking him like a trophy. It was a deliberate move, a silent, cutting display of power. Whispers rippled through the courtroom as eyes darted from Juliet's glamorous presence to Nicole's poised but modest figure. The trial began, and Thomas wasted no time. With a sly smirk, he launched his opening statement, twisting facts and casting shadows over Annabella's character. Then came the moment Nicole dreaded the most. Thomas, with a theatrical flair meant to humiliate, referenced Juliet openly, insinuating that Annabella's personal life was as messy and treacherous as the crime she was accused of. The courtroom murmur grew louder. Nicole felt the walls close in, her heart pounding as faces in the gallery exchanged smirks and sideways glances. The unspoken message was clear. Nicole was nothing next to Thomas's polished showmanship and the spectacle he had crafted right before their eyes. Nicole's hands clenched the legal pad in front of her as the silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. The game had begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. She could almost hear the clock ticking inside her head, time slipping away to prove her client's truth before this dangerous performance engulfed them all. As Thomas's pointed remarks echoed through the courtroom, Nicole felt a wave of heat rush to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the sting of unjust judgment. The sly sneers from the opposing counsel's table, the barely concealed smirks from the jury, and the subtle shakes of heads in the gallery, all seemed to form a barrier between her and the truth she held in her hands. This was more than just a legal battle. It was a calculated humiliation designed to collapse her confidence before she even had the chance to speak. Annabella's eyes darted nervously between Thomas and Nicole, a flicker of hope mixed with dread. Though strong-willed, she was visibly shaken by the public spectacle her former lover was orchestrating. The courtroom, once a place of impartial justice, had morphed into a stage where personal vendettas played out under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Nicole's pulse quickened as she glanced down at the stack of documents in her folder, evidence meticulously collected, but at this moment, seeming insignificant against Thomas's theatrical assault. The air felt thick, oppressive. Nicole could feel every pair of eyes on her, expectant, skeptical. Some judges whispered to their clerks, others exchanged quick glances. The atmosphere was no longer calm or professional. Nicole's throat tightened as she recalled the whispered comments she'd overheard among firm colleagues before the trial. Dismissive assessments of her ability, rumors that she was in over her head. Each word Thomas uttered felt like a confirmation of the doubts already shadowing her every move. Her mouth dry, Nicole fought to steady her breathing. She hated feeling so vulnerable, exposed to ridicule on such a public scale. But beneath the weight of humiliation was a persistent ember of resilience. She had battled prejudice her whole life, growing up in a neighborhood where people doubted a girl with her background could ever make it. She had endured professors who underestimated her, colleagues who sidelined her, and now a courtroom that seemed ready to dismiss her. Salvation came in a brief, unexpected moment, a subtle nod from the judge, signaling that Nicole would have her chance to present her case. The anticipation hung heavy, a delicate balance between hope and fear. She briefly caught Annabella's grateful gaze, a silent plea to not let the weight of this humiliation crush what little faith remained. As Nicole prepared to stand, she felt the cumulative pressure of past mistreatments, hushed doubts, and the public spectacle bearing down on her. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. But just as she was about to speak, a faint whisper crossed her mind. Strength isn't the absence of fear, but the courage to face it. If you've ever felt underestimated or doubted in your own journey, remember that the hardest battles often pave the way for the strongest victories. Stay with Nicole's story, because her path will remind us all that resilience amid humiliation can ignite an unexpected power no one sees coming. Nicole rose from her seat, the courtroom lights seeming suddenly harsher, scrutinizing every gesture. Her hands gripped the folder tighter as she stepped toward the podium, determined not to betray the nervous flutter in her chest. The words she had rehearsed countless times felt suddenly fragile under the weight of hundreds of eyes, but she forced herself to begin. Her voice trembled at first, soft, hesitant, but gradually grew steadier as she unspooled the narrative, carefully constructed through long nights of research and preparation. She laid out timelines, financial records, and witness statements that pointed to a far more complex web of deceit than the prosecution, or Thomas, had presented. The room shifted perceptibly. Some jurors leaned forward, scribbling notes, while others exchanged wary glances. Yet, despite the deepening intrigue of her case, Nicole wasn't blind to the subtle and not-so-subtle obstacles arrayed before her. Thomas sat back smugly, occasionally casting glances laced with condescension or amusement. At one point, he interjected with a pointed question designed to trip her up, questioning the authenticity of a document she had painstakingly authenticated. For a brief moment, Nicole faltered. The judge's eyes turned to her, expecting clarity. She swallowed hard, searched her mind for the correct response, and offered a clear, grounded explanation backed by corroborating evidence. The courtroom murmured, but her answer seemed to hold the tide, at least momentarily. Still, the sense of being trapped in a storm intensified. Every step forward was met with resistance. Every argument he undermined with a new insinuation or sarcastic jab, aiming not just to dismantle the case, but to unravel Nicole's composure. A particularly cruel moment came when Juliet caught Nicole's eyes, a faint, mocking smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It was a reminder that beyond legal maneuvering lay personal stakes and prejudice against Nicole's gender, background, and perceived naivete. That glance sent a chill down Nicole's spine, a signal of how carefully Thomas weaponized appearances and alliances. Despite the mounting pressure, there were flickers of hope. During a brief recess, a seasoned juror approached Nicole quietly, expressing sympathy and a willingness to listen beyond Thomas's showmanship. Her client, Annabella, showed signs of renewed strength, drawing courage from Nicole's resilience. These small victories buoyed Nicole's spirits, even as the courtroom drama threatened to overwhelm. Still, a persistent gnawing feeling refused to abate. Was it enough? Could she overcome the spectacle, The judgment, the whispers. As she returned to the courtroom for the next session, she steeled herself for the battles yet to come. The path ahead was treacherous, but the first cracks in Thomas's armor had started to shimmer in the dim light of possibility. For anyone who has faced repeated setbacks or fears their efforts won't be enough, Nicole's story proves that courage isn't about perfection. It's about standing up again when the world pushes down. Stay tuned, because the storm isn't over yet, and sometimes the darkest moments forge the brightest victories. The courtroom had morphed into an arena where every glance and whisper seemed sharpened into a weapon. Nicole's breath came in shallow bursts as the trial reached its most grueling phase. Thomas, sensing the pressure she was putting on his carefully constructed narrative, unleashed his most brutal tactic yet, one designed to break both Annabella's spirit and Nicole's resolve. With a calculated smirk, he produced a series of edited emails, presented as explosive proof of betrayal and deceit, cleverly twisted to frame Annabella's innocence as a sham. The judge watched intently as Thomas laid out his version, each word dripping with disdain. The courtroom audience barely concealed their shock and scorn, eyes fixed on Annabella like she was already guilty. Nicole barely recognized her client's face. It was pale, tight with the weight of impending ruin, a stark contrast to the confident woman who had walked into this trial months ago. Nicole's heart sank as her attempt to rise from these devastating revelations was met with scoffs and cynical looks. Colleagues she had admired now averted their gaze, their doubt palpable. Witnesses who had offered supportive testimony seemed to waver, their resolve weakening under the brutal spotlight. The humiliation felt suffocating, a physical force pressing down like a vice. For a crushing moment, Nicole felt utterly alone, the young lawyer swallowed by a sea of harsh judgment and hostile questions. Her hands trembled as she clutched the evidence folder once more, the weight of failure pressing heavily against her chest. She closed her eyes briefly, fighting the rising tide of panic and self-doubt. Could she stand firm? Would she find the strength to continue when the room had turned so cold, so hostile? Then, in the quietest moment of the courtroom, she caught sight of one thing that anchored her. Annabella's trust still flickered, fragile but unwavering. That silent connection sparked a flame deep inside Nicole, a reminder of why she had fought this fight in the first place. As the session adjourned for the day, the murmurs didn't die down. Outside the courtroom, whispers of gossip and speculation swirled around Nicole like a storm cloud. She could hear fragments. She's outclassed. No chance of winning now. Voices that battered her pride and threatened to erode her will. But beneath it all, a small voice inside urged her not to give in. The battle had taken an unforgiving toll, but every setback was a lesson. Every humiliation, a call to rise stronger. Nicole knew she was closer to a turning point, though she couldn't see it yet. For anyone who has ever felt crushed beneath the weight of criticism or failure, Nicole's story is a reminder. The lowest moments often precede the greatest breakthroughs. Courage doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers in the silence, gathering strength for the storm ahead. If you find yourself facing seemingly insurmountable odds, stay with us. Nicole's journey is far from over, and her next move, it just might change everything. After the crushing wave of despair that had engulfed Naomi, she found herself utterly isolated, her daily steps heavy with the weight of unforgiving judgment. The laughter and whispers echoed relentlessly, amplifying the sting of every public embarrassment. The cold rejection from colleagues who once greeted her warmly left cracks in her spirit. Yet, in the slow spinning of her world's darkest moment, a faint glimmer of introspection began to take root. Late one evening, as Naomi sat alone on the worn bench in the empty park near her apartment building, the chilled air seemed to wrap around her like a protective shawl, rather than a harsh reminder of solitude. Her gaze lingered on the bronzed leaves swirling at her feet. She thought about the cascade of incidents, the betrayals of trust that had left her exposed and vulnerable. She replayed the moments when she had been silenced and shamed, and the piercing question surged forth. Was this truly the reflection of who she was, or had she allowed others to define her worth? In the silence, Naomi's fingers trembled with the weight of vulnerability, yet also with the stirrings of something new, resolve. She remembered the encouraging words from Mia, the kind colleague who, despite not intervening openly, had offered a subtle smile the day Naomi was publicly humiliated during the team meeting. It wasn't much, but it was a thread of kindness in an otherwise cold tapestry. Seeking solace, Naomi reached out to a community support group online that specialized in workplace challenges and personal growth. The initial messages she received were filled with empathy and shared stories of similar struggles. Each testimony was a beacon of resilience, reminding Naomi that behind the facade of pain lay the possibility of renewal. She began to journal daily, pouring out her emotions with raw honesty, tracing the contours of her hurt and tentative hopes. Yet, the path ahead remained anything but clear. Each attempt to rebuild was met with setbacks. When Naomi tried to assert herself in meetings, her voice wavered. When she reached out for support, some doors stayed firmly closed. The anticipation of rejection haunted her every move. Still, every small victory, the encouraging nod from a quiet teammate, a heartfelt email from a former mentor, processed slowly like droplets nourishing parched soil. Amid these moments, Naomi also discovered a growing reservoir of empathy within herself. She revisited memories of her own past mistakes, the times she had judged others harshly before understanding their plights, and realized that the harshness she faced was often a reflection of collective insecurities. This insight began to forge a new armor, not of bitterness, but of compassion. It was in this space of vulnerability, coupled with quiet determination, that Naomi's inner voice grew clearer. To reclaim her story, she would need courage, authenticity, and the willingness to seek not only justice, but also healing. Though the storm had battered her spirit, the seed of transformation was planted, ready to sprout with nurturing care. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by unfair judgment or isolation, remember Naomi's first fragile steps toward hope, a reminder that every dark night can give way to dawn with patience and faith. The journey may be daunting, but it is worth every ounce of strength invested. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Naomi had been quietly attending the support group, sharing her story in fragments, still wary of fully exposing her wounds. One evening, a message popped up from someone named Claire, a woman who revealed she had once faced a similar experience of public humiliation and professional exile. Claire's tone was gentle but unwavering, offering not only understanding, but a tangible suggestion. Why not confront the false narratives head on? Not with anger, but with undeniable truth and grace? At first, Naomi hesitated, the fear of further exposure overwhelming her. But Claire didn't vanish. She kept checking in, guiding Naomi to view her situation not as a trap, but as a stage for reclaiming dignity. Encouraged, Naomi crafted a heartfelt letter addressed to her entire team. A message that did not deny the past humiliations, but reframed them as vital lessons, expressing vulnerability while asserting her commitment to growth and mutual respect. When Naomi sent the letter, the reaction was immediate and electric. The office buzzed with whispers again, but this time, something shifted. Rather than mockery, murmurs turned to curiosity and cautious admiration. Colleagues who had once dismissed her began to approach, some offering apologies thinly veiled by surprise, others engaging her in conversations that were once denied. The hum of office politics began to dissolve as the truth, presented calmly and courageously, broke the cruel cycle of rumor. Then came the real turning point. During a company-wide meeting, the very person who had orchestrated much of Naomi's humiliation, a charismatic but insecure team lead named Vanessa, was unexpectedly confronted by the company's director. Behind closed doors, confidential complaints about Vanessa's behavior, sparked by Naomi's courage, had prompted an investigation. Slowly, details emerged: the backstabbing, the manipulative comments, the culture of fear Vanessa had thrived in. Vanessa's facade cracked. The once untouchable antagonist found herself isolated as colleagues who had feared her began to distance themselves. When the director addressed the team, acknowledging the painful dynamics and committing to cultivating a respectful environment, the room exhaled with relief and hope. Naomi's heart raced, watching all unfold. The pain and humiliation she endured now felt like the shadows that must recede before dawn. Yet she remained composed, refusing to gloat or seek vengeance. Instead, she extended an olive branch to those willing to change, embodying a grace that silenced lingering doubts. Her strength wasn't in retaliation, it was in truth, kindness, and resilience. Reflecting on the journey, Naomi realized this ordeal was teaching a profound lesson. Courage to face adversity authentically can turn the tide, dismantle false judgments, and inspire healing not only for oneself but for an entire community. For anyone finding themselves trapped under the weight of unfair judgment, let Naomi's transformation remind you that confronting pain with honesty and heart can shift even the darkest storms toward light. Sometimes, the greatest power lies in vulnerability combined with quiet courage. If you've ever felt misunderstood or cast aside, take a moment to absorb Naomi's journey, because when we find inner strength to speak our truth, the world begins to listen, and a new chapter can begin to unfold. With the tides turning, Naomi stepped into her new reality with a measured confidence that was hard-won, but unmistakably authentic. The office atmosphere shifted palpably. The harsh whispers that once shadowed her were replaced by thoughtful nods, and in many cases, sincere apologies. Her colleagues, having witnessed the unraveling of the toxic undercurrents that had threatened not only Naomi, but the entire team's cohesion, began to embrace a culture of respect and openness. Naomi's presence in meetings transformed from a source of tension to a beacon of calm determination. She found herself voicing ideas with clarity, no longer overshadowed by doubt or dread. Where once she had flinched at the piercing gaze of Vanessa, now she met it without flinching, her eyes steady and resolute. The power dynamics had shifted, not through confrontation, but through consistent demonstration of integrity and strength. Vanessa, stripped of her influence and facing official reprimands, became a quiet figure in the background, her manipulations unraveling under the company's scrutiny. Some tried to justify their past behavior, but the collective accountability Naomi had helped spark left little room for excuses. The company implemented workshops on workplace respect and communication, signaling a commitment to prevent the injustices Naomi endured from recurring. Amid these changes, Naomi discovered something unexpected in their effects: a renewed sense of belonging and purpose. She began mentoring new employees who faced their own insecurities, offering a listening ear and gentle encouragement. Her own experiences, once a source of shame, now became a foundation for empathy and guidance. Through helping others reclaim their voice, Naomi reclaimed hers more fully. The shift was not without its challenges. Some residual doubts lingered inside her, moments where the old fear crept back. But with each day, those moments became less frequent, easier to confront. Naomi realized that strength isn't the absence of vulnerability, but the ability to face it and continue moving forward. Justice had been served, not through tit for tat, but through the restoration of dignity and the dismantling of a toxic culture. Naomi's journey was a testament to the power of resilience, showing how truth spoken calmly and courage born from pain can transform lives. Watching her colleagues respond, not with mockery, but with respect, reinforced a deeply satisfying truth. The greatest victories are those that uplift rather than injure. Naomi's spirit, once dimmed by humiliation, had rekindled into a steady flame, guiding both herself and those around her toward a better environment. Her story spread quietly beyond the office walls as a paragon of overcoming cruelty through grace. And as she looked ahead, Naomi knew that while the past would always be part of her, it no longer defined her limits or her future. Through resiliency, compassion, and unwavering truth, Naomi reclaimed her place, not just as a professional, but as a person worthy of respect and kindness. And in doing so, she illustrated an invaluable lesson. Sometimes the fiercest battles lead to the most profound peace. If you've ever struggled to find your voice in the face of unfairness, let Naomi's story inspire you to stand firm, reclaim your strength, and inspire transformation beyond yourself. The path isn't easy, but it is always worth it. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Naomi had been quietly attending the support group, sharing her story in fragments, still wary of fully exposing her wounds. One evening, a message popped up from someone named Claire, a woman who revealed she had once faced a similar experience of public humiliation and professional exile. Claire's tone was gentle but unwavering, offering not only understanding but a tangible suggestion. Why not confront the false narratives head-on? Not with anger, but with undeniable truth and grace. At first, Naomi hesitated, the fear of further exposure overwhelming her. But Claire didn't vanish. She kept checking in, guiding Naomi to view her situation not as a trap, but as a stage for reclaiming dignity. Encouraged, Naomi crafted a heartfelt letter addressed to her entire team, a message that did not deny the past humiliations, but reframed them as vital lessons, expressing vulnerability while asserting her commitment to growth and mutual respect. When Naomi sent the letter, the reaction was immediate and electric. The office buzzed with whispers again, but this time something shifted. Rather than mockery, murmurs turned to curiosity and cautious admiration. Colleagues who had once dismissed her began to approach, some offering apologies thinly veiled by surprise, others engaging her in conversations that were once denied. The hum of office politics began to dissolve as the truth, presented calmly and courageously, broke the cruel cycle of rumor. Then came the real turning point. During a company-wide meeting, the very person who had orchestrated much of Naomi's humiliation, a charismatic but insecure team lead named Vanessa, was unexpectedly confronted by the company's director. Behind closed doors, confidential complaints about Vanessa's behavior, sparked by Naomi's courage, had prompted an investigation. Slowly, details emerged: the backstabbing, the manipulative comments, the culture of fear Vanessa had thrived in. Vanessa's facade cracked. The once untouchable antagonist found herself isolated as colleagues who had feared her began to distance themselves. When the director addressed the team, acknowledging the painful dynamics and committing to cultivating a respectful environment, the room exhaled with relief and hope. Naomi's heart raced, watching all unfold. The pain and humiliation she endured now felt like the shadows that must recede before dawn. Yet, she remained composed, refusing to gloat or seek vengeance. Instead, she extended an olive branch to those willing to change, embodying a grace that silenced lingering doubts. Her strength wasn't in retaliation. It was in truth, kindness, and resilience. Reflecting on the journey, Naomi realized this ordeal was teaching a profound lesson. Courage to face adversity authentically can turn the tide, dismantle false judgments, and inspire healing not only for oneself, but for an entire community. For anyone finding themselves trapped under the weight of unfair judgment, let Naomi's transformation remind you that confronting pain with honesty and heart can shift even the darkest storms toward light. Sometimes, the greatest power lies in vulnerability, combined with quiet courage. If you've ever felt misunderstood or cast aside, take a moment to absorb Naomi's journey. Because when we find inner strength to speak our truth, the world begins to listen, and a new chapter can begin to unfold.